welcome back to the Idea Lab, a safe space to discuss any and all ideas related to service. This week, I want to talk to you all about onboarding. We're going to continue that conversation we started last week with how to create a classroom community, but now we're going to talk about how do we onboard new students. So at the beginning of the year, we're going to create our classroom community in the way we set up our classrooms by setting our classroom expectations, by setting our classroom routines. We're going to take that opportunity to make sure that everyone in our small groups know each other and we introduce them to one another. However, as the year goes on, some students are going to filter out of our classes. They're going to make the progress they need to, and we're going to bring new students in. Now, as we bring those new students in, that's going to have the potential to create a lot of disruption within our classrooms because these new students don't have the same understanding of what the culture is, what the expectations are. They're not necessarily going to be feeling that sense of belonging that the group we had before did. And so, by making sure we go through an onboarding process where we introduce those new students, we introduce them to our rules, our expectations to the other students, we're able to create that sense of belonging with them while also ensuring that they follow the classroom expectations and they have that predictability as to what the routines are going to be. So, the first thing we're going to do when we onboard is we're going to go through introductions. We're going to take the time to make sure every student introduces themselves, and we're going to introduce ourselves as well. Now, more than likely, the students already know a little bit about you at least. They've seen you around the school, they've seen you pull students out of the class. More than likely, they've wanted to join your class just to see what happens in those small groups. And so they know who you are, but it's still helpful to share a little bit more, especially if it's a student that's seen you around but you haven't interacted with too much. And then, although these students may be in the same class with one another, there's no guarantee that they're actually friends or that they talk too much to one another and know very much. So, taking that opportunity to go around the room, have people introduce themselves, have them introduce a few things that they might like to do, and then when you're seeing commonalities, when two people say they love to watch a particular TV show or they enjoy going down by the river, making that connection, emphasizing and saying, oh, look, both of you really enjoy time at the river. That's something you have in common, can be helpful to create that connection within your group. When we finish with our introductions, the next step in onboarding is to introduce the new student to the classroom routines. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds of brain development here. I'm just going to say that a child's brain is still developing. It's not as capable of self regulation as the rest of us. And so a child is more likely to fall into that state of fight or flight than an adult would be. And so, to help avoid that, to help keep the behaviors down and to keep the students self regulated, the more we can make the day predictable, the less likely the student is to become dysregulated and become a behavior problem in our classroom. So, having a set of routines and ensuring that the students know those routines. These are the days that I come and meet with you. When we meet, these are the things that we do in classroom. This is how the day begins. This is what happens in the middle of our session. And then this is what happens at the end of the day. Can be really helpful in making sure the student feels safe within that classroom environment. And because they feel safe, there's no need for them to fall into that fight or flight and become a behavior problem. Now, the final step in onboarding is expectations. At the beginning of the year, you should be setting expectations with the whole class. This is how we behave while we're in class. Expectations are best set collaboratively. At the primary level, the students we're working with right now, we can't necessarily make it an entirely collaborative setup. The students are only going to be so capable of coming up with ideas, but we still want to bring their voice in to the extent possible. And so we'll have a few non negotiables. These are the expectations that the teacher holds, and then allow the students to add to them. Is there anything else that you feel we should have as expectations as well? And by doing that, the students feel a greater sense of belonging, a greater sense of sort of ownership to the environment and to holding to those expectations because they helped create them, because they agreed to them, the students are more likely to follow them. When we bring a new student in, the new student doesn't know any of these expectations. So it's going to be very helpful for us to pull out those expectations and review them with the whole class. These are our classroom expectations, and allow that new student to decide, is there anything that needs to be changed in here? Anything that we should add? Anything that maybe we need to word a little bit differently? And make sure that the expectations are written in such a way that that student can follow them as well. And if the student has no changes to make, the fact that they were pulled into the process, the fact that they were able to make a commitment based on looking at them, they were given that opportunity to add their voice to them, should help that student to be able to follow those expectations a little bit better. And so when we go through the onboarding process, when we're creating that classroom community, we want to make sure that new students get onboarded. We want to make sure that we do introductions so everybody knows one another and feels a little bit of a connection with one another. We want to make sure that we go through the classroom routines. That way, everybody's going to have the same understanding and predictability of the day. And we want to make sure that we go through the expectations and that we give the student the ability to change those expectations or to add their voice to them should there be any need for doing that. If we go through these 3 steps in the onboarding process, we are going to be well on our way to creating a space where students feel safe, feel that they can try, they can fail, they're not going to be made fun of, and they're going to have a much easier time staying self-regulated and following the expectations because their stress levels are going to be lowered. Continue watching this channel to find out more strategies for how to do classroom communities.